If you're involved, you must tell us the truth.
I'm not involved. I'm telling you that. I'm not involved.
Well, why should somebody put you there?
I don't know. I've been telling you over and over. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I don't know. I don't know what they put me in it for.
For days, police searched for Lynette White, a witness for the prosecution in 2 separate trials. They assumed she was just laying low. That was until they made a forced entry into her apartment. And there she was, not laying low, but lying dead. What happened to Lynette White? Welcome back to Mysterious 7, where we shed light on under-the-radar cases from across the globe. Today, we're looking at a 15-year-old cold case with an insane twist, finally solved. Without further ado, let's get into it. Lynette White was a beautiful young woman from Cardiff, Wales, who was doing what she believed she had to do in order to get by. She dropped out of school and had been working as a prostitute since she was 14. Being a sex worker wasn't part of Lynette's childhood dream. Weeks before she was found dead, Tim Rogers, a BBC Wales journalist, interviewed her while investigating child prostitution. During the interview, she told Tim how she was drugged, taken to Bristol by a gang of men, and forced into prostitution. Yet even after Lynette found her way back to Cardiff, she could not find her way out of prostitution. By 1988, Lynette, who was now 20 years old, was working the streets daily as a prostitute. Described as popular and pretty by friends, Lynette was probably the most visible prostitute working in Cardiff at the time. She was the first girl to be out at lunchtime and would be the last to leave at night. Working every day, rain or shine, even on Christmas, earning £100 per night. One would almost think White was working hard to have a better life. But that was not the case. It was all to pay for her boyfriend, Stephen Miller's cocaine addiction. Every night, Miller took £60 to £90 from Lynette, who was his only source of income. Lynette lived with Miller in a flat on Dorset Street in Cardiff. Each day, Miller would drive her to Riverside in Cardiff where she worked and meet her later in the evening at the North Star Club to collect her earnings. It continued like that every day until February 9th, 1988 was the last day Miller saw Lynette. She had not made contact with Miller or her friends in the days leading up to her death, which was very odd behavior for her. She was also due to make an appearance as a witness for 2 prosecution trials when she disappeared. No one knows the reason why White stopped contacting others 5 days prior to her death. The police thought she was deliberately hiding to avoid giving evidence and began to actively search for her. Earlier that same month, Leanne Vilday, Lynette's friend, had loaned Lynette her keys to a flat for the purpose of taking clients there for sex. On February 14, 1988, in the evening, Leanne, who probably wanted to use the flat, went there but found it locked, which was quite unusual. Lynette was nowhere to be found. Leanne became very worried about Lynette. She drove to Butte Town Police Station to report her friend's disappearance. She returned to her James Street flat with 3 policemen who were expecting to serve an arrest warrant on Lynette and take her in. The policemen forced entry into the apartment and found Lynette lying there, in a pool of her own blood. A missing witness found dead with massive injuries. Who murdered Lynette White? According to the autopsy performed by pathologist Bernard Knight, Lynette had been stabbed over 50 times on her chest, face, stomach, wrist, breasts, arms, hands, and inner thighs. Her throat was also savagely slit from ear to ear. Though she was stabbed multiple times, the autopsy revealed that Lynette died from the throat injury. The pathologist also determined that Lynette was murdered on February 14th between 1:45 a.m. and 4 o'clock a.m. Lynette's body was found between the foot of the bed and the window, covered in blood. Azoospermic semen, which is semen containing no sperm, was found in her vagina and also on her underwear. There were 2 different blood types found on Lynette, her own blood and an AB type blood, which did not belong to Lynette. Soon the news about Lynette's death had spread, and police began to ask questions about the incident. Witnesses told the police that they saw a man looking distressed in the area where Lynette's body was found on James Street. The man looked very suspicious, and he appeared to have blood on his hands. The suspicious man, described as a white male, approximately 5'8" to 5'10", and in his mid-30s, became the primary focus of the investigation. Efforts to find this man were exhaustive. Soon they arrested a man that matched the suspect's description, but he was soon released after he presented his alibi. Police looked into Miller, Lynette's boyfriend, as the partner of a murder victim is usually the first obvious suspect. Miller was questioned but later released because his blood type didn't match the one found on Lynette. Because Lynette was supposed to appear as a witness against a man named Francine Cordell in court, Francine and his mother were investigated, but soon the 2 were eliminated as suspects because their blood also did not match the AB blood type found on Lynette. Very little is known about the case against Cordell or the other case that Lynette was set to give evidence in. Another suspect that piqued the investigators' interest was a man who was on a list of 12 persons of interest in the area due to their past criminal activity. He was a sex offender and a pedophile who lived close to James Street. His identity was concealed, and he was called Mr. X. When Mr. X was interviewed, he admitted to paying Lynette for sex in the past and was unable to account for his whereabouts at the time of the murder. Mr. X had blood type AB, which prompted the police to run a DNA test on him. When the results came back, it eliminated Mr. X from the investigation. Now, all that the police were left with were statements gathered from their door-to-door inquiry. Gromick, who lived in the flat right above where Lynette was murdered, together with his friend Atkins, gave statements implicating each other in their accounts. But as the statements contained 4 completely different accounts, the investigators didn't take it seriously. Ronnie Williams, a police informant, also gave an account implicating his common-law brother-in-law, Yusef Abdullahi. He initially claimed Abdullahi knew the killer and later implicated him directly, saying Abdullahi was the killer. It was known to the police that the 2 detested each other, so again, investigators dismissed the account. Leanne Vilday, who reported Lynette's disappearance on the day she died, was also suspected and questioned. The police visited her daily to question her. The pressure was becoming too much for her to handle, and one day, while she was drunk, she named Miller and Abdullahi as the killers. Violet Perriam, a secretary at a Cardiff yacht club, also gave a statement about the incident. 8 months into the investigation, she came forward claiming that on February 14th, while driving home from the club at about 1:30 a.m., she saw 4 excited black males outside the building where Lynette was killed. She then identified 2 of them as John Actie and Rashid Omar. Perriam's statement would give the case a new direction. Angela Sala, who is mildly mentally retarded, also gave a statement that she saw Miller, John, Rashid, Ronnie Acton, John's cousin, Tony Paris, and Tony Brace outside 7 James Street on the day Lynette was murdered. This was exactly what police needed, as her account corroborated Perriam's statement. Further implicating Abdullahi, John, Miller, and the rest were Gromick and Atkins, who gave new statements on the same day with Sala. They said they also saw a group of men, including Ronnie and Abdullahi. Sala then gave another statement in December 1988 that she heard a scream from Lynette's flat and rushed there with Vilday. Coincidentally, on the same day, Vilday also told the police that she went to the flat after she heard Lynette scream and met Miller, Abdullahi, Ronnie Actie, Miller's brother, and an unnamed mixed-race man. Unfortunately for Sala, she had an AB blood type. Police insisted that her blood was found on Lynette's socks. She then gave a new statement that she was part of the killing together with Vilday and the other guys. Vilday also admitted that she was forced to cut Lynette's wrist to ensure her complicity and silence. Miller confessed to killing Lynette after 307 denials. He also implicated the other men named, which led to the arrest of all the men allegedly involved in the murder. On December 7, 1988, the police arrested Stephen and Tony Miller, Youssef Abdullahi, Ronnie Akhti, Rashid Omar, and Martin Tucker. On December 9, 1988, John Akhti and Tony Paris were also arrested. For close to a year, they were locked up until their trial began on October 5, 1989, at Swansea Crown Court. This trial became the longest murder trial in British legal history, lasting 197 days. After spending 2 years in custody, Ronnie and John Akhti were acquitted of the murder, while Tony Paris, Stephen Miller, and Youssef Abdullahi were found guilty. Each were sentenced to life imprisonment, and since then they're known as the Cardiff Three. Even though no forensic evidence linked these men to the crime scene, they were held as the criminals. However, there were a lot of doubts and questions about the convictions. Consequently, the friends and families of the Cardiff Three began a campaign to overturn the convictions. The campaign received massive support and was followed by television documentaries in 1992. By December 1992, the Cardiff Three's appeal was heard. After the Court of Appeal had listened to Miller's interrogation, Lord Taylor said the police had bullied Miller during the interview.
If you're involved, you must tell us the truth.
I'm not involved. I'm telling you that. I'm not involved.
Well, why should somebody put you there?
I don't know. I've been telling you over and over. I don't listen. That's what I'm saying. I don't know. I don't know what they put me in it for.
Therefore, the truthfulness of Miller's admission was irrelevant. The Cardiff Three were free at last. Their convictions were declared unsafe and unsatisfactory by Lord Taylor. But if the Cardiff Three didn't commit the crime, it means the real criminal was still roaming free. It brings us to yet the same question. Who murdered Lynette White? 8 years later, the case was reopened. This time, Professor Dave Barkley and Chief Superintendent Kevin O'Neill were assigned to the task. The case took the officers back to the crime scene. By then, it was already 12 years since the incident happened. While examining the old crime scene photographs, Professor Barkley's eyes caught something that no one else saw in all these years. It was a large drop of blood believed to have been thrown from a knife onto the wallpaper. When the crime was committed in 1988, police removed lots of wallpaper in the flat to be stored as evidence. Upon searching through the old wallpaper evidence, they discovered that the only missing piece of wallpaper was the one that contained the large drop of blood. The forensic scientist didn't give up, though. He continued to study the crime scene photos and realized the blood could have dropped on the skirting board beneath. Underneath several layers of paint, the team found the blood completely sealed in and dry. Traces of the blood were also found on a piece of cellophane wrapper from a cigarette pack. Since then, the detectives and scientists dubbed the suspect Cellophane Man. The forensics team, led by Angela Gallup, got to work. But shockingly, the DNA profile was not found in any of the 140 police databases. But when the police searched for similar profiles, it was narrowed to just hundreds in the Cardiff area. Using the approach of familial DNA searching, a partial match was eventually made with the profile of a 14-year-old boy. This boy was known to the police as he was once arrested for joyriding in Cardiff. But could he be the Cellophane Man? If you thought about his age, then your guess was right. He wasn't even born when the incident happened. At that time, the case was 15 years old. Notwithstanding, the police had to visit his house. When they got there, they were told that the boy's father was dead, but he had an uncle, Jeffrey Gaffour. On February 26, 2003, detectives pulled up at Jeffrey's home, a semi-detached house in the village of Llanharan, 15 miles west of Cardiff, but no one was home. The following day, they checked at Jeffrey's place of work, an office block in Cardiff city centre where he worked as the security guard. When the police explained the reason for their visit, Jeffrey said, "Oh, I thought you got some guys for that." He was asked to provide a mouth swab and he complied. Immediately, police checked the swab. They had finally caught the Cellophane Man. Chief Superintendent Kevin O'Neill was determined to do things right this time. He put a surveillance team on Jeffrey while he made preparations for the interview. Chief O'Neill had plans to put surveillance on Jeffrey for a whole week, but on February 28, 2003, Jeffrey made a crazy move. The surveillance team spotted him at a garage where he bought 3 packets of paracetamol, an over-the-counter pain reliever. By the time the police got to Jeffrey's house, he had taken about 62 paracetamols. Jeffrey denied ever taking those tablets, but he announced, "Just for the record, I did kill Lynette White. I've been waiting for this for 15 years. Whatever happens, I deserve it. I sincerely hope to die." He was taken to the hospital where he told a staff member that he was being watched because of a murder he committed 15 years ago. Jeffrey was prepared to die as he initially refused to be treated. He eventually agreed to take an antidote. Within a few days, he had recovered. On July 4, 2003, Jeffrey pleaded guilty to Lynette White's murder, and the judge, Justice Royce, sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 12 years and 8 months. Jeffrey's barrister said Jeffrey killed Lynette over 30 pounds for sex. He said Jeffrey wanted his money back when he changed his mind. In February 2007, Atkins, Sela, Vilde, and Gromek were charged with perjury. By December 2008, Sela, Vilde, and Gromek were found guilty and sentenced to 18 months of imprisonment each. Atkins was exempted because it was believed that he was bullied, threatened, abused, and manipulated to admit to false accounts suggested to him. In March 2009, it was announced that there was enough evidence to prosecute the police officers involved in the initial investigation with conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. In 2011, the trial collapsed due to missing evidence. In 2015, 8 of the 15 charged officers cleared of perverting the course of justice launched a high court civil action against the force, suing for malicious prosecution, false imprisonment, and misfeasance. But at the end of 2015, the judge in the civil action dismissed their case. The 5 falsely accused men were compensated after their release. Stephen Miller was paid £571,000. John Actie was paid £300,000, while Tony Paris was paid £250,000. Ron Actie died in 2007 after much struggle to cope with what had happened to him. Yusuf Abdullahi also died in 2011 of perforated cancer. He too had battled with post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's it on the Lynette White case. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section.